गया था आस्था, तो
Yeah.
जरा देख लेना, संभाल लेना। हाँ,
Yes, ma'am. Yes. A very good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Valuation Manthan webinar session 2, hosted by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. I am CA Astha Gulati and I will be serving as the moderator for this session. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our esteemed chairman of Valuation Standard Board and Central Council member of ICI who introduced this Valuation Manthan series, CA Hansraj Chuk sir. CA Hansraj Chuk is a renowned chartered accountant. He has been
Ashtaji,
associated.
it's okay. The introduction part is done. You see, like now we have to start with the technical and the issues. Basically, you see, like me being a chairman and our co-chairperson, Preeti Savla, the knowledgeable person around us. The speakers are to be introduced. Rest everyone we can skip with the permission of the Preeti. I can make it a request ki there is no need to every
yes sir.
time. Yeah, yeah. To as far as the introduction of we both of us,
Yes
but
sir.
the speaker has to be introduced because the speaker every Manthan session will be
Right.
changing. Otherwise, we are stable. We are there for the year. So the next year we can also change. Then in the first session you can introduce everyone. So yeah,
Yes, sir.
with these basically you see like whenever the new initiation or the new things whatsoever is been taken forward by the new chair and the co-chair by the new committee. So naturally the thought changes. Thought also changes because of the every human is a fertile brain. More so the professional we talk about. So we also have a, similar kind of thought. Our co-chairperson Preeti Savla has really brought so many good points while we were discussing in the very first meeting with the team. Naturally, so many resources
हाँ,
around us which are
पहले बाहर
external.
वो छोटे बाथरूम है ना उधर का, उधर से ही
I'll
ना पानी
request
लेके
everyone to mute with. Yeah. So, with the process we've thought of, let us bring one program which is every week because this is a this valuation side for the professionals having a bigger opportunities on a continuous basis, on a week to week basis. We must do some kind of program which has been accessible to all across the globe, not limiting to a particular place in the physical program, which we really thought which we really go with. Normally that has a some kind of limitations, but the webinar kind of things everywhere across the globe where the time suits to our system, who everyone can join with those kind of the benefits of the webinars, and the speakers also feel comfortable. Speakers all across the globe, we have identified some of the speakers from the overseas also, which may in the time to come in the series in the time to come they will be joining us. You see like the valuation side valuation side has a many things to understand with, whether for the startup, whether for the purpose of the income tax, whether for the purpose of the companies act, whether it is for the merger acquisition, whether for many things. And not only the financial assets, going forward we'll be targeting with the land and building also, and maybe in the time to come related with the plant and machinery also. Maybe those may not relate with us as a directly as a chartered accountant, but they are the experts with the support from the chartered accountants, because there are two aspects involved. One is the technical to that particular subject, another one is the commercial side. And naturally, we being a chartered accountant, no one can do better, or no one can understand better in those commercial aspects. So with those kind of understanding, this series has been started with. You see, like today we'll be going with our own friend from the profession, Parag Kulkarni ji. He is a well-recognized, well-known person in the valuation side. He is a chartered accountant and traveled a journey and having a good experience. And the subject today will be the merger and acquisition, valuation on of merger and acquisition, which will be definitely, you see, like with the kind of the economy we look at, whether it is $5 trillion economy or going forward, by 2047, the $50 trillion economy. The merger and acquisition is the only way by the economy of scale can be developed with, by way of the company can survive with, or company can really grow with. So with though that is why these kind of the subjects are highly important for the professionals, those who are really been into the corporate world, those who are serving to the corporate community, those who are inside the corporate community, or the external consultants also. So today, fortunately, a strong man, a brain with us is Parag Kulkarni. Before inviting him, I'll request my co-chairperson, Preeti Savla, for her word of wisdom and her remarks, initial remarks for the program. Over to you, Preeti Ben.
Very respected Chairman of the Valuation Standard Board, CA Hansraj Chukji, and all my distinguished speakers, colleagues, audience who have joined on this Sunday morning. Valuation standards and the Manthan series 2. We have today with us Parag Kulkarni, well known as introduced by Chairman. Whenever anything comes to the valuation, we always recollect Parag and hence invited him for his knowledge on expertise and experience on M&A activities. And Astha is always available with us to serve us. So friends, it is our endeavor to serve the best to all the members, our fraternity of our institute. And that is why we have given the charge of Valuation Standard Board. We have planned a lot of activities, and one of the activities is the Manthan series. So friends, let us see how best we can serve all of you. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to connect to us so that we can definitely serve you all the best. Right now, we have terms of reference for our board. A lot of activities, 8 to 10 projects we are going to do in this Valuation Standard Board. And friends, if you have any suggestions, please reach out to us. So with this brief thing, I welcome all of you on behalf of Valuation Standard Board and must appreciate the efforts of Sonali Dasaldar, who is the secretary, for supporting and doing all the activities for this series. So thank you so much, and over to Astha.
Thank you, ma'am, for that informative remarks on valuation standard and their importance on financial reporting. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, CA Parag Kulkarni, sir, who is a Harvard Business School alumnus and an expert in the fields of merger and acquisition. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Astha. Dear members of ICAI, my alma mater, that's where, from where, we all began our journey as a student and subsequently becoming distinguished members. It is a pleasure to welcome you all for this conference on valuations in mergers and acquisitions. And I'm honored to be here as a speaker, joined by esteemed members of the Valuation Standard Board, Chairman Sir Chub and Vice Chairman Madam Preeti ji, as well as our moderator, CA Astha Gulati. Before I begin my technical remark, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined today from around the world. And we are delighted to have thousands of members of ICAI joining us for this important discussion. Valuations play a crucial role in mergers and acquisitions, and I'm excited, to share my insights and experience with you all. And I'm confident that our discussion today will be both informative as well as engaging. And I hope that you'll find it valuable in true sense, because I know that for a fact, when we speak about a valuation, you are going to also measure the value of these 2 hours of Sundays. And I hope to, bring genuine value from 10 to 12. So once again, thank you for being here with us today. And I look forward for the insightful and productive conference. As the world economy continues to evolve and businesses strive to remain competitive, mergers and acquisitions have become increasingly common. However, the success of M&A transaction depends heavily on the accuracy of the valuation. Indeed, valuation is the foundation on which M&A deals are built. And A miscalculation can have disastrous consequences. Now, in my today's remark, we will explore intricacies of valuation in M&A and how to navigate the challenges that arise. We will examine various valuation techniques, but I'll prefer not to discuss on the discounted cash flow model because previously, and I believe that even going forward, we have been repetitively engaging ourselves into the discounted cash flow model and the intricacies around it. But I'll prefer to speak on even the pitfalls to avoid and the best practices to follow. And by the end of the speech, hopefully, you will have deeper understanding on valuations in M&A and be equipped with the knowledge and tools to make the more informed decisions in your own business dealings. Having said that, valuation professionals, mergers and acquisition specialists, and market participants often use market multiple to estimate the value of business or parts of business. Now, the methodology invokes what we call as a law of one principle. Law of one principle, according to which identical assets must have identical prices. In practice, one estimate the value of the subject company by observing prices paid for similar companies relative to some benchmarks such as EBIT, earning before interest and tax. Now, an EBIT multiple, for example, is what? It's simply the ratio between the observed enterprise value in the numerator and the corresponding EBIT in the denominator. So numerator by denominator gives you a number when you calculate it, and that's what we call as a multiple. Because in the denominator we have EBIT, we are saying it's a EBIT multiple. Similarly, the ratio between enterprise value in the numerator and earnings before interest and taxes and depreciation and amortization, that is EBITDA, gives us EBITDA multiple and so forth. You put revenue in the denominator, you get the revenue multiple. Now, next 20 minutes to 35 minutes, I'll try to summarize the basic steps in valuation analysis based on market multiples and would review some of the practical pitfalls and limitations of this particular methodology. And I'll tell you the reason why I have specifically chosen multiple methodology to deliberate in today's remark when we are trying to connect it with the M&A. And like I said, what happens when you look at your transaction and you try to compare it with some others? One product company was sold for 20 CR, and another product company like WhatsApp was sold for billions of dollars. And you say that the WhatsApp, a company that was created with only 17 employees working when this deal was made, when Facebook acquired WhatsApp, paid billions of dollars. I have an organization, and by the way, that time WhatsApp was not even charging any money. So there was no recurring revenue. There was no direct revenue, but there was only potential to bring the revenue. There were some non-financial indicators such as number of users who installed that application and who have been actively utilizing it. So a non-revenue, non-EBIT, non-EBITDA company also gets a larger value, and your company, which is revenue, having recurring revenue, having maybe positive EBITDA, having maybe marginally positive EBIT, gets lower valuation. Why is it so? How is it so? And why my company doesn't get the as large valuation as many other startups get? By the way, we are not here to behave like people who behave in Shark Tank. We are hardcore professionals. We don't look at a value at a point in time. We look at the value that gets created over the period of time. We are here, we're professionally trained. You and I are professionally trained individuals who understand a very fact that deals that happen in the air often results in burning out the cash and not getting the success. So we are the organizations, we are the individuals who have been trained to pass our judgment and look at those multiples and see through how can we calibrate it, adjust it, and then in true sense, bring a fairness to the value. So in many ways, valuation based on market multiples is analogous to the exercise many people go through when they buy or sell common assets, such as maybe a house or maybe a used car. Now, the best way to price the used car is to look at the bid and ask prices for similar cars and or maybe the actual recent transactions for similar cars. In other words, to invoke law of one price, LOOP, what we do is we look at the parallel prices. However, no two used cars can be exactly alike. They may differ in some attributes like They may have different mileage, different engine size, different comfort options, different color, different general condition, different repair history, and so forth. So, in that context, while there are many used cars for sale, at one time, there are many fewer that closely match the make, model, year, mileage, various other options, color, and so on, to be valued on that basis and to be compared on that basis. Hence, one generally infers a range of value from, on the one hand, and small number of sales of nearly identical cars, and on the other hand, maybe the larger number of deals for similar but not identical cars. So a smaller sale value having identical attributes, but it's a small sample, and then the larger sample may not have very much identical attribute but maybe similar attributes, but a larger sample giving you the larger range of valuation. Now, how reliable is the estimate of value and how narrow the range inferred will depend partly on the skill and diligence of the person, that is you, who is performing the valuation, and partly also on the quality and availability of the pertinent data. Now, valuation of businesses using multiple, it's sometimes called as a market approach. To contrast it with discounted cash flow valuation, which is sometimes called as an income approach. So a market approach and income approach. A markets directly or indirectly apply the concept of law of one principle. So it is very common to see valuation professionals apply both methodologies to a single company or transaction, as they often give somewhat different indications of the value. But if they're fundamentally giving different values, then there is a high possibility that some of the assumptions that you have made may not be in line with each other. For example, if you are using very high multiple on the market approach basis, and if you are using, let's say, the free cash flow a number of years, let's say only 3 years, for a growing organization where the expected growth will expected to continue, let's say, for minimum 5 to 6 years. Imagine if you're valuing a company which is working on artificial intelligence or machine learning. Do you think you can do the valuation of this company by doing prospective financial information only for 3 years and then calculating the annuity in that basis? May not be, because the growth rate that you have for initial year, first year, second year, third year, in terms of the revenue, could be fundamentally different from what kind of growth rate that you will have from 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, 7 to 10 years, and more than 10 years. So different growth period models is what usually we look at when we look at the income-based approach. But for a fact, because it's a new organization, we need to also plug in something what we call as the probability of failure. Now, on the one hand, we are applying the probability of failure and doing a lot of the realistic measurement, including the discount for a lack of marketability because it's unlisted space, and maybe because you're diluting the non-controlling stake, you're also applying discount for lack of control. Or in the income approach, on the other hand side, in the market approach, you're not calibrating it. Now, that's why the values could fundamentally differ, and hence some adjustments are necessary when you apply the market approach. Having said that, now let's discuss the framework that typically we apply when we are applying the market approach, that is a multiple based scenario. Now, in the market multiple approach, we usually we draw these multiples generally from the stock prices of public companies or the prices from a completed transaction such as M&A, obviously, which involve public or private companies. Now, the public company multiples or the listed company multiples, we call it as a trading multiple, and the transactions that we observe of M&A and the multiple that we draw from those transactions, we call it as transaction multiples. But in either case, the analytical process has three basic parts that can label for convenience. As the first part could be search and select, second part could be adjust and compute, and third part could be apply and conclude. Let me repeat. The first step is search and select, second is adjust and compute, and third is apply and conclude. So let's discuss these three steps one by one. Now, the first part of the process is the selection of group of comparable companies. That is, companies whose business operations are as similar as possible to those of the subject company. Now, this requires a thorough understanding of the subject. For example, how does it create value? What drives its financial performance? Who are its customers and suppliers? With whom and how it compete? So you need to actually go back to the white space and look at the competitive landscape. What risks does it face? And so forth. So comparability is established by matching key business attributes of subject company with those of another group of firms. And the similar step is used as we did in the car analogy to match attributes such as the make of the car, the model of the car, the year of the car, the engine size of the car, the mileage of the cars, and various options that we discussed. Now, given an understanding of the subject business, one could prepare the list of characteristics and then simply inspect companies one by one until some are identified that possess such traits. However, this is often inefficient. And worse is that it could lead to a serious selection bias. To guard against such bias, a systematic selection procedure should be designed prior to the inspection of possible comparable companies, and certainly before any examination of their multiples. So in a selection process, the very sub step is to create a framework in which first you analyze the traits of your subject company, and then on that basis you create a selection framework by noting down, okay, the company is running not more than 20 years. The company should have turnover not more than 500 cr, because if you are valuing, let's say, a company of 25 cr, and then if you are using the multiple of the conglomerate like 1000 cr revenue, or let's say 2000 cr revenue, maybe 10,000 cr revenue, you're looking at more stable company, and the more stable company brings lesser risk. On the other hand, your company, which is a 25 CR company, which has not yet identified how to move from one S curve to another S curve, uh, uh, possess maybe reasonably or comparatively the higher risk. So if you just adopt the multiple from the listed company and apply it on your subject company, that may not make any sense. So while you can choose the companies from the same industry, that doesn't mean that you just create the loop of or the sample of 90 companies from same industry and choose the average multiple and apply it to your company. That's not how the multiple methodology is applied. Imagine a situation, you are valuing a software company, maybe a product company, and then you just go out in the market, look at the listed space, and you get companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, Persistent, Quickhill, and the n number of names. And what do? So does it mean you just get numbers of all these companies and then identify the enterprise value of those companies, identify the revenues which are publicly available information, identify those multiples and average it out and then apply to your company? No, that's not how you do that. There is a process. So the information bias needs to be eliminated. The selection process should preferably try to eliminate those selection biases and try to make that sample more closer to the attributes and characteristics of a subject company. Now, I know for a fact when you apply these multiples of the listed entities, which in that sense refer to more stable companies, cannot directly be applied to companies having turnover of 2 crore, or cannot be applied directly as such to the companies having turnover of, let's say, 20 crore or even 50 crore, right? But then the calibration is necessary. So coming back to our discussion, like I was saying, given the understanding of the subject business, one could prepare the list of the salient characteristics and then simply inspect companies one by one until some are identified that possess such traits. So one way to minimize the selection bias is to develop a set of hierarchical screens to be applied successively to large sample candidates. And the earliest screens are cheap, objective tests intended to capture the relevant universe of companies or deals. Now, these are applied to large commercially available databases, such as, like, for example, we use Bloomberg database, or we use a Standard and Poor's Capital IQ database. Now, at this early stage, the objective is to be inclusive and make sure no plausible candidate is overlooked. So, for example, we might begin with the universe of all public traded companies and then maybe eliminate all those not corresponding to certain SIC code. And then the next, we might complement this effort with another in which maybe we perform the keyword search on all publicly traded companies with business descriptions, and using keywords corresponding to certain products and services, the next step can be performed. For the US based companies, the web based tools such as 10K Wizard is there, which can make such as quick and inexpensive. And by combining results of these SIC search along with the keyword search, along with some other tools or the screening that you do in Bloomberg or in Capital IQ databases, in that sense, it reduces the possibility of inadvertently overlooking the possible comparable company. Now, the next set of screen is to progressively exclude the companies. The first step is to include the companies by looking at typically the features or the characteristics of the product and of the company. The second step is now to exclude the companies based on the objective criteria, such as the final industrial characteristics, such as from 3-digit SIC code you go to the next 4-digit SIC code, and then you look at the measure of size, geography, or degree of diversification. And once the sample has been winnowed to a manageable size, we can then analyze the remaining companies in the great in detail by examining the financial data, maybe the news reports, maybe the SEBI reports, or maybe the for US side, the SEC filings, and so forth. Now, how is it relevant for the M&A deal? Often when I work on the buying side and I invest myself in various startups, companies come to me and say, I'm looking at the valuation of 50 CR. I'm looking at the valuation of 100 CR. Now, your company has not yet built the MVP. Your company has not yet, you don't even have the POC. You don't even have, the single customer. You just have an idea, and you're saying the value of that idea with, some basic code or some basic setup is 100 CR, is 200 CR. And often people get influenced with some of the TV channel programs, and they come and they start asking a really, really, high valuation. And then when I ask back them, how do you identify this particular valuation? They often say that, okay, now the leading organization in this space is this. It has a multiple of 40 times of revenue. I'm asking for a multiple of 35 times the revenue. Or sometimes they go on and say, my company is better than the other because, I'm the unique product in the entire universe. So I'm asking for, the 50 times multiple than the average 40 times multiple of the companies in this industry. Now, that's really insane. Okay. That's not how the deal happens. A deal happens at a point in time in M&A when the buyer feels that he has a gain in the deal. And seller also knows that he has gain in the deal. A deal is not a deal when it's lopsided. A deal happens only when it's exactly fair and when the buyer sees a value in it. If buyer doesn't see a value in it, if buyer sees a lopsided deal, buyer says, today is not a day when I'm going to invest in you. Come back to me tomorrow. And then tomorrow you experience another reality. And then you come back and you say, I realize, I was a mistake. I was not able to achieve the recurring revenue of so much amount, and now I think
recording stopped.
My revenue is my valuation is not 100 CR, maybe it's 80 CR. And then again the buyer side said, even as of now we believe it's just an MVP. We don't want to invest, okay, for the expected valuation of 80 CR. And in which industry are you working? Is it healthcare? Is it chemical? And what are the typical multiples we are looking at? When any investor comes in and invests, he has a minimum expectation of some kind of return, maybe 15% return per annum, or maybe 20% return per annum. And it also depends on the type of investor that you bring on the table. Is it angel investor? Is it VC investor? And what kind of round you're working with? Is it seed funding, VC funding? It's a Series A, Series B, etc. So in that sense, if today you are asking for the valuation of 80 CR, and if investor brings in that money with expectation of, let's say, 20%,
recording in progress.
Yeah. So I hope, we are live, and I hope I can continue my discussion because somebody's in between it's starting and stopping the recording. Astha, you there? I'll continue with the deliberation.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. I hope,
Yeah, please continue.
I can continue, right? If there is any challenge, please let me know and interrupt me in between.
Yes, sir, please continue.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So when you are expecting a valuation of 80 CR, and somebody, you are expecting buyer to invest at ATCR valuation only at the ideation stage, or maybe at the MVP stage, or maybe at the small quantum of the recurring revenue stage, then he's going to come with an expectation of minimum 20% or 15% of per annum growth. Now ATCR to grow at 15%, 20%, it needs to be also substantiated heavily with the actual revenue and actual profitability. And when it doesn't happen, then the investor security, which is primarily preferred stock, automatically gets converted. Maybe a convertible preferred stock gets converted from his original dilution of, let's say, 10% to now dilution of 20%. And if subsequent down the round happens, it's more disastrous. And hence, making a deal at fair value is as equally important to the seller as it is to the buyer. Often the deals at her end breaks the buyer, breaks the seller. The one who is issuing the security, that is from the selling side, from the startup owner side, if he is asking for too much of valuation and if he's not going to perform, then the sharks will be coming in with the preferred stock, will be actually eating up most of the pie of your creation. And there is a high possibility that even if they have invested, let's say 5 CR for the valuation of ATCR, ultimately results in only the value of 5 CR and they take everything back home. Okay, so coming back to the discussion, having the right set of multiples in order to get the right value, in order to ultimately go and do the deal at a fair range is important. So finally, we select certain multiples to calculate based on market participants' views of the relevant metrics. Now, the most commonly used multiples, like I said, are enterprise values, our revenue multiple, CBIT multiple, and EBITDA multiple. Now, one also encounters industry-specific multiple that relate to value. To say, for example, or sales per square foot, or sales to subscriber base, or sales to patent base, and so on. Like you go to when you go to buy a home. Do you say what is the multiple of the house? You say what is the rate per square foot, right? So it's a very industry specific multiple that we look at, and we very commonly utilize it. And then in cities like Mumbai, you have to pay 1 lakh rupees per square foot. And there are some other parts of the country, you pay, let's say, 5,000 rupees per square foot. What brings that value? Is it because of the locality? And then the locality is fundamentally different from the financial inputs that we're looking at. We are neither referring to the revenue nor referring to the profitability or anything. We are just looking at the locality, which is one of the qualitative input, and we are looking at the multiple, which per se looks a financial, but that derives from non-traditional financial multiples, such as the area per square foot. Now, coming back, the market multiple approach is sometimes used to estimate subject company's equity value rather than its enterprise value. And in such instances, the multiples computed from comparable companies, derived stock values, and market capitalization rather than enterprise value. So while you do the valuation, please try to analyze what kind of multiple you should apply for asset heavy industries such as automobiles, such as OEMs. It is better to apply enterprise valuation multiple than the market capitalization multiple in order to first get the enterprise value and then distribute that value over the equity holders and to preferred stockholders and to convertible note holders and to debt holders, for two reasons. The very first reason is that the capital structure of the company could also bring additional value to those set of companies. We call it as a levering effect. A company having equity of 1 and debt of 3 has a overall enterprise base of 4, and the overall enterprise base of 4 can bring the enterprise value of 12. Okay, and out of 12, maybe the 6 could be attributable to equity holders. Now, in a given space, out of 4, 1 is the equity component, and out of the total price enterprise value of 12, maybe 6 or 9 could be the attributable to the, rather 9 is the value towards equity holders. Okay, so 12 minus 3 is equal to 9, which is attributable to this one equity holder. So there you get the 9 times valuation. On the other hand side, if somebody has different capital structure where he has entire 4 as equity, then the enterprise value is still 4, is still 12, but then one equity value gets the multiple of 3. So one company gets the multiple of 9 when we look at it from the equity side, and another company, because of its less efficient capital structure, gets the equity multiple of 3. So when you apply the multiples of comparable companies having differing capital structures, that particular impact may also need to be plugged in. If you apply the multiple of 3 to your entity having better efficient, a better or more efficient capital structure, then you are devaluing your equity, right? Because then you're applying the multiple of 3 to your equity when you know that actually you have the better capital structure. On the other hand side, if you apply the multiple of 9, you end up getting the better value. So the capital structure also plays a vital role, and it's a strategic choice to either rely on the enterprise value multiple or the equity value multiple. And while you do so, you need to also substantiate your claim. Why are you choosing the enterprise value multiple or the equity value multiple? Now, the next obvious question is, how large a sample of comparable is needed? As with the most statistical exercises, the easy answer is the more is better. I mean, the larger sample tends to increase the reliability of the estimated multiples. But unfortunately, we are often confronted by trade-off between a degree of comparability and the sample size. The larger the sample size, the reduced comparability. So it's a trade-off that's important. Now, that is, if we are willing to accept a lesser degree of comparability to the subject, we can generate larger group of comparables. A pragmatic response to this difficulty is to examine more than one set of comparables, ranging from small set to closely matched companies to larger sets of loosely matched companies, and see what the effect it has on the indicated value. No, please note that it is always dangerous to select comparable companies based on multiples themselves or financial measures that directly affect the multiples. That is, we should not look at the set of comparables and then decide to exclude those with the EBIT multiples. This generates bias rather than insight. Now let's look at the second thing, which is adjust and compute. So the first step was select, right? The second is now the adjust and compute. Now we already have the sample ready. So computing multiples requires a calculation of enterprise value on the one hand and one or more operating metrics on the other hand. So enterprise value is generally computed as the market value of invested capital. And most simply, this is the sum of market values of debt and equity securities outstanding, including hybrid securities like in the preferred stock. So in practice, we sometimes assume that the market value of debt equals to book value, but in reality, it's not. Now, it's your policy choice whether to utilize book value as the market value of debt. But I'll tell you what happens in the M&S model. Rather, when we actually work on the transaction, if a better credit rating company is acquiring the less better credit rating organization, then if I'm working on the buying side, I see an efficiency in getting the debt to the acquired organization, maybe through, by now subsequently guaranteeing, the parent company's guarantee can be offered if it's a security acquisition, or if it's a business acquisition, obviously now the debt at a lower interest rate can be extended to the acquired business and so forth. So the synergy can be identified, and that synergy can be valued separately. That's the one point. But let's look at the negotiation side. When we know that for a fact, the credit rating of the organization is weak and it has borrowed at fixed rate of interest at a given point in time, and as of today the applicable interest rate should be higher than what it looks today. So let's take a realistic situation, and I think all of us have experienced that particular fact. If 4 years back companies have borrowed when the overall interest rates in the US or even in India or in some other parts of the world, they were lower than what they are today. If people and organizations have borrowed a loan at historically low rate at a fixed rate price, as of today there are two possibilities. The first possibility is that the market obviously had changed, and hence even at the same credit rating, the applicable market rate would be fundamentally different. Even if, let's say, you have credit rating of AAA or let's say A plus, now the applicable market rate for the same date for the remaining outstanding amount would be potentially the higher interest rate. So now you need to look at the repayment of that date and then discount it by using the existing credit rating. But secondly, what we do is we also do this synthetic credit rating, and we try to look at how the credit risk had changed since the origination of the loan contract. So if the loan which is outstanding at the borrower entity, uh, okay, which has been sanctioned and disbursed 4 years back, or let's say 3 years back, was on the basis of its that time credit rating of, let's say, triple A or A plus credit rating. But as of now, we do the synthetic credit rating. We identify then as of today what is a credit rating, maybe let's say a B, triple B, or a B stable, or let's say B plus. Whatever credit rating that comes in, then what is the applicable interest rate for the remaining outstanding given a given repayment schedule. And on that basis, we actually do the fair valuation of that date. It's very important that we do that. And then we apply, then we calculate the enterprise value, then we apply it. And then finally, we from the enterprise value, so we have the multiple, we apply the multiple, we get the total enterprise value, and then we reduce the fair value of date, we reduce the fair value of hybrid instruments to finally get the fair value of the remaining equity. And then we make a policy choice whether to invest in equity directly, or whether to invest in hybrid instrument, or whether to invest in the debt instrument. So typically, these are all decision making pointers which we actually do when we work in the deal. So deal making is not, I mean, it's not as simple as you getting the numbers, computing it in Excel, and saying that with the DCF, the discounted value is the fair value. It's a little more than what it looks like. So once the this market value of invested capital is computed, we compute the necessary operating metrics such as EBIT, EBITDA for each comparable company, depending on the desired multiples. And it often will be necessary to adjust and normalize financial or other data to obtain consistent operating metrics. Now, the goal is to preserve and enhance the comparability within the sample by stating each company's metrics on the same basis. For example, maybe we can apply LIFO or FIFO, the way we do for accounting of inventories, that affects the company's cost of goods sold, which in turn can affect the EBIT and EBITDA. So obviously, the LIFO is not permitted. But there are companies who apply FIFO, and there are companies who apply the weighted average for the inventory valuation. Now, while we are looking at the comparable multiples, we know for a fact that inventory is significant portion of the current asset. So it definitely impacts the working capital. But over and above that, the way the accounting happens, if there is a company which applies the FIFO method, and there are some other public companies from our sample which are applying the weighted average method, then what does our company apply? The subject company under analysis, if it is applying the FIFO method, then we should prioritize choosing the multiple of, let's say, a company that has adopted the FIFO methodology. Because we all know that when it comes to the ultimate profitability at the end of the year, it is more often the inventory that gets adjusted. I mean, formally, no one accepts this, but you never know. Ultimately, when the inspection happens, sometimes you look at that product in an isolation, the value is less. You look at that product in connection with other assembly items, suddenly the value goes up. So it's a little gray area from the investor side. Investors know for a fact there is an accounting gimmick that runs behind the inventory that in turn impacts your EBIT and EBITDA. So while you create the comparable metrics, even looking at the accounting policy becomes one of the critical decision-making factor while you choose certain companies from the sample as a comparable company and a comparable multiple. Okay, so let's move on then. So and finally, if there are certain non-recurring items that needs to be eliminated, the discounted operations impact, the discontinued operations impact, then the extraordinary gains and losses, unusual taxes or shields that were available to those companies must be removed. Let's look at maybe companies like Facebook. If you look at their last 10 years financial statements, you would say that their taxes 8 years back were very less, and since last couple of years the taxes were going up. It's because now they have exhausted their tax shield. Now the multiple that they had, the profitability multiple, or even the profit that they had 3 years back, and if you look at that particular multiple, then it's so obvious that multiple has to be on the higher side, because somewhere in that multiple is plugged is what is a tax shield that is available at their end. So look at whether your company has a tax shield, and if the comparable company has that similar tax shield. Now, one of the better argument on the selling side is that, see, the multiple that we're applying, maybe of the more matured companies, and that multiple could be, let's say, 15 times of EBITDA, EBIT multiple. Okay, but that company, or 15 times of sales multiple, or let's say 5 times of sales multiple. Okay, so that particular multiple reflects a company without a tax shield. Now, what I'm saying is, you apply the same multiple to my company. In terms of the adjustment, we know for a fact the other company is more stable, my company is less stable. The other company is obviously has less risk in terms of continued business. My company may have higher risk in terms of continuation of the business. But how about the tax shield that is available to me? At least for certain number of years, I should get benefit of it. So let's not calibrate from multiple of 5 to multiple of 3. How about then applying the multiple of 4 instead of multiple of 3 that you are proposing? So what I'm saying, let's not apply the entire multiple of 5, because then it's like calling my company to be as large as and as better as the other company. But still, I don't want to devalue my company or undervalue my company by saying I'm going to apply multiple of only 3 times of revenue. 3 times of multiple is what even the service company gets. Mine is a product company. I should get at least the 5 times of multiple, but I'm okay because it's a bridge funding round, because it's maybe a series A round, or maybe because it's a series B round where will be primarily the product is ready, most of the risks are now reduced, and it's a growth capital that is necessary. How about we negotiate and conclude the deal at 4 times of the revenue or 4.5 times of the revenue? So that's how you need to build the negotiations. Now, even if we conclude, okay, 4 times of the revenue or 5 times of the revenue, 5 times of revenue to be applied on what? Is it on the trailing multiple, that is last 12 months, or it is to be applied on the next 12 months? And then again, the second level of negotiations begin at that point in time. Taking it ahead, even carefully computed multiples obviously will differ within the sample of comparable companies, and then the analyst must decide how to conclude on 1 or more multiples for application to the subject. Simple means and medians are the most common measures of central tendency within the sample, but central tendency also makes your subject company as an average company. There is a possibility that you are able to sustain, and in the competitive landscape, you are out competing the market primarily because you're not an average company, but you are more than average. So applying the median or mean multiples could also mean that you are qualifying the subject organization as a median organization or a mean organization. So my recommendation to you that use the Porter 5 process model, do the competitive landscape, and then while you're concluding the deal, you look at the multiples in the industry, you identify the median organizations and median multiples, you compare your company with those median and mean comparable companies, and in the competitive landscape, identify where is value getting created and where is the potential of creating the value. And in that competitive space, if you believe that you are better than the median organizations, or if your market share is growing because you're a growing company, or because of you're technologically more advanced, and that's where that becomes your critical success factor, then in that sense, you please go out and negotiate, because that's how we negotiate when we are working on a selling side. Okay, let's move on to the last part under the multiple approach, which is the third step, that is apply and conclude. Finally, you have selected companies, narrowed down onto the particular data set of comparable companies and comparable transaction multiples. The second step was to look at actual multiples, and then also identify which multiple is right multiple to be applied in this industry. And last but not the least, finally, let's select those multiples, apply them, and conclude the valuation. So to conclude the multiple, multiple is applied to the subject company by computing the product of the identified multiple and the indicated operating metric. And further adjustments may be required, like I said. For example, if the subject company has non-operating assets such as excess cash, or maybe surplus land, or the surplus assets, then that needs to be added on top of the equity, the operating metrics equity value that has been identified. Now, another common adjustment that we do is to is to look at the operational control, because there are companies which comes with better governance, and in this context we are looking at something called as ESG, and the G is for the governance, by the way. So E and S I'm not going to speak today. Even we are not here to discuss on detail of ESG, but in today's world, rather since last couple of years, we are putting a lot of stress on the G part while we are valuing the companies. If on a buying side, when I invest in different companies, if I have, let's say, three product companies to invest, or let's say three manufacturing companies to invest, with, let's say, good profitabilities and good revenue, but at my end, I need to deploy my policy choice as a capital rationing process. So, and also as a part of diversifying my own portfolio, because I cannot keep on investing this year into only one set of companies. Like if I know for a fact I have X amount available at my end to invest in technology company, product company, or into manufacturing company process, or let's say into this particular industry, and from that industry, if I have three suitable candidates which have been shortlisted, and let's assume that I'm okay for two out of three candidates, I still prefer to go with a candidate with a better governance if I'm getting a good deal, because that operational control and that governance definitely contributes to the credibility of the value that has been concluded. Governance works like a magic. The transparency from the selling side works like a magic. It brings a lot of comfort on the table to the investor. And yes, we don't know yet how to calculate the value attributable towards governance, but at least while we do the choice making or do the conclusion in the deal, I think on an investor side we are more comfortable when we are saying that yes, is the governance in this organization is better. So now in last 10-15 minutes while I'm discussing this issue, let me also address some of the practical issues. Practical issues such as the sample size, sample statistics and range, then the seasonality, cyclicality, and staleness, then maybe about the leverage, about the unreliability of the market data, and the regression or the factor analysis. And let me invest next 10 minutes in doing that before I jump onto the later part of the conversation in this speech, where I'll be discussing more on the macroeconomic factors and how we try to analyze it, and what all factors must be analyzed and plugged in. So next 10 minutes for the practical issues. Give me a second to have a sip of water, and then we will continue with the discussion. Okay. So the first practical difficulty while what we face is in deciding the sample size. The small samples of comparable companies hobble the analysis based on multiples in number of weeks. Most obviously, a small sample tends to reduce the degree of confidence that I can place as an investor on the concluded value or on the concluded range of values. And of further concern is that the sample statistics are less reliable because they come from maybe the summaries of data in small samples than in large samples. For example, there could be outlier that has a greater effect on the mean, and so you need to identify the quartile, and you need to actually exclude the outliers. But excluding the outliers again make the sample too small to rely. Like I remember in one of the other deal we had in true sense only two companies, two identical companies which we believe which can be truly used for the valuation and comparability, but the selling side was not really appreciating it. He stick to the fact that no, you are undervaluing my organization, undervaluing my my company. So it becomes quite tricky and challenging situation. So yet simply looking at, like I said, the sample median instead of the mean can be misleading. Often people ask me whether median is a better measure than the mean. And let me tell you, like I said, simply looking at the median or a mean can be misleading, since the median of small sample may be very, very sensitive to the particular values of few inner observations. And that's the reason the data visualization is important, and then you need to actually look at the scatter diagram and see how the values of various companies are scattered. And if they're closely scattered, it at least brings me a confidence, and in that sense then the median can still be okay. If they're closely scattered, or if they're not so closely scattered, then again, it becomes very, very difficult to look at and apply even the median, or look at the mean to be applied. Okay, let's hit the second practical issue that I face is the sample statistics and the range. So sometimes multiples are inferred not from the mean or median of a sample, but from some other statistics, for example the upper quartile or lower quartile. Now the justification given is usually that the subject company is somehow stronger or weaker than the mean or median. I've given you the framework, I've given you the idea. The way we do it is we apply some of the competitive landscape framework, and we do a lot of strategy analysis as well in that sense. But maybe as a beginner, you can actually apply the Porter 5 forces model and look at the subject company and look at its competitive landscape and conclude qualitatively how is it stronger than the competitive landscape, or how is it weaker than the median in the competitive landscape. And in that sense, you can then choose maybe the first quartile or third quartile to do the valuation. Now, like I say, the practical question is somehow the suitability of selected company is questioned. The other party comes up with a set of companies which are more generic in nature, and then we negotiate on the basis saying that the companies or the sample that you have selected doesn't truly reflect the comparable companies, and then we start eliminating one by one, and then finally the ultimate question that still remains unanswered on the table is, what if even the companies that are remaining out of this sample size are really not comparable? And the very first question is, why even they were chosen? Why even the geographic spread was not applied while we're choosing the company? Why are choosing companies only from India? Why not then from USA? And if it's a USA is too developed organization, why not from the Brazil? And the Brazil doesn't come with the software prowess, then maybe why not Vietnam? So all these questions come in, which may sound, or which you may think that we are then still making this discussion very confusing, but that's how the deal negotiation happens. Let me speak about the third thing, which is seasonality, cyclicality, and the staleness. So multiples based on transactions data are culled from the deals that occurred at different points in time in the past. How far back is relevant? So a deal that happened 2 years back, and the multiple of that, is it relevant for me today? If you remember the stock market prices, what they were in January 2020, just before the pandemic, they were too high. And then, the pandemic hit and the prices fell down. So all multiples suddenly, they fail. And then during the pandemic, all these companies such as Netflix, Facebook, the Meta and Alphabet like Google and Apple, all these companies stock once again went up, right? And then the US recessionary trend hit in few months back, and again stock prices were plunging. So the obvious question is, how much back can you go when you're looking at the multiples? What is the time element when we say the recent transaction multiple is applied? Whether 2 months is sufficient, 3 months is sufficient? And look at this. If the company is, let's say, opening its new setup, let's say, altogether new geography or a new market, then you should apply your own multiple that you got when you started your business 10 years back, because then the risks that are posed for new geography or new setup, or when you diversify into new product, it's possibly as similar as what you were facing 10 years back. So as of today, you may be a more stable organization, and I'm very sure that on the governing side and on the control side, you can bring better control. And yes, there is a benefit of you being an existing company, but you applying multiple of your existing company that is 10 years old, good revenue earning and profit making company, to value the business that you are doing, which is more of a diversification either in terms of the product and geography, is not acceptable to me, because you don't have experience. You have experience of 10 years in doing something else. You don't have experience of doing the same thing that you're imagining to do now for new product and new geography. So in that case, the staleness of the information is questioned. The seasonality and cyclicality, like I said, and those seasons and those cycles may not always represent 12 months calendar, may not always represent 365 days, may not always represent 52 weeks. The season and cycles could represent 4.5 years, could represent 6 year, 35 days, could be different than what we look at and the way we live in terms of the days and nights and days and months and years. So looking at a particular metrics and multiple in a given season and then applied to the subject company could in that sense disastrous, and that definitely brings in one of the practical challenge. Now, the second last point which I wanted to discuss on the practical side is the leverage. Now, when the desired output of valuation analysis is the value of the subject company's equity, it may be tempting to focus on the equity value multiple, like the PE ratio or price to cash flow ratio. However, it is generally safer to use multiples for the enterprise. Like I said, to conclude enterprise value and then to make appropriate adjustment. That is subtracting the market value of the outstanding debt from the overall enterprise value to arrive at the equity value. This is because the equity multiple are very sensitive to leverage. And we actually, look at the example where I said, in the first example, we had equity value, which is 9 times of the equity got a multiple of 9 times, and in the second case equity got a multiple of 3 times, and that was a primary effect of the leverage. So like I said, this is primarily because the equity multiples are very sensitive to leverage. That is, two firms with identical businesses will have different PE ratio because of the debt leveraging impact. And then how you plug in that CAPing impact into the discount rate is also subject to question. The higher the date, higher the risk, the higher the expectation on the equity side, on the equity investor side, and hence that becomes another practical challenge. The last practical challenge which I would like to share with you is the unreliability of the market data. So an analysis based on the market multiples relies not only on the suitability of the comparable companies, but also on the market from which the prices are obtained. So when using trading multiples, we need to feel confident that, okay, relevant equity market is active. I mean, it's a stock market where people come and trade. So it's an active market. And we believe that, okay, traders have the information on the basis of which they are deciding whether to trade or not to trade. I mean, whether to buy or not to buy. And we also believe that the prices are administered and they're not distorted. And some central authority or some non-economic phenomena has not distorted or manipulated the entire scenario. But in hindsight, when we look back, we just realize that, oh, some certain scam has happened. So at a point in time, usually we don't know how reliable that data is. But yes, it's an inherent limitation. We can't do anything about it than only giving the disclaimer when we write a report, or when you yourself invest, it's the risk. So you need to ask yourself, you are a risk seeker or if you are a risk seeker or you are conservative in that sense. So if you're a risk seeker, you can actually take the calculated risk by looking at the governance of the company, and then in true sense, looking at the value of those companies. So without naming the company in the Indian market, I know for a fact, I mean, we all know for a fact, somebody in the USA declares something, he does the short selling, and then the value, he brings up at a particular report. Everyone questions on the number of that company. It's primarily on the authenticity of the data, and then suddenly market collapses. And there are many people who invested in that company, and it's very unfortunate that they lose the market cap, and then suddenly a few days later again the market cap is getting reinstated. So it's very volatile market, and I don't have an answer to the question whether the fair value 6 months back was a fair, or whether the fair value 2 months back was a fair, or whether the today's value is fair. I believe that the fairness of the value comes only when the market is active and two people trade, and they trade on the basis of certain information. And the fair value is fair only at that moment in time when the trade happens. Okay, I think that's where my deliberation on the market multiple approach concludes. But I have some more things to discuss with you, and I think we still have maybe half an hour to deliberate on. And here I will now connect the overall valuation that we do with the macroeconomic outlook that we try to bring in the negotiation. So by the way, if you have any questions, please keep on writing and sending these questions. Hopefully, after next 20 minutes or after next 15 minutes, we will take a pause, and then we will try to see if those questions can be answered. Okay, so let me put my thought process into the overall macroeconomic factors. Now, the today's business leaders are expected to be informed, and they're expected to have an informed, current, and strategic perspective on the economic performance of a wide range of countries, and they're expected to have it fast. That challenging task is made more difficult by the absence of standard method of approaching, synthesizing, and extracting insights from the macroeconomic indicators. So a similar problem confronts students and the professionals like us while learning to understand and work with these key indicators of corporate performance in a standard part of modern business school. When I was studying at HBS, we also faced with similar situations and how to analyze the GDPs of the country. Rather, we went on in some of the aspects, in some of the discussions, where we actually read the balance sheets of the countries to make potential inferences on the currencies and the exchange rates. So, by the way, next 15 minutes, I will try to introduce you and recommend you a framework that addresses three problems, or not three problems, but multiple problems. But I'll prefer to give you a kind of framework. I call that framework as a guide. Okay, in the framework that I have in my mind, I call it as a guide. That is GUIDES. Okay, guides. That's how I remember it. So every time anyone calls me to speak for one of the conferences, somewhere at the back of my mind, I have a mind map. I have to speak on GUIDES, and in a sense, I'm going to explain you what does guide means. So the component of guides. So G means GDP and growth rate. Okay, then U means unemployment and the utilization. I means inflation and interest rate. Then D means debt and deficits. E mean external balances and exchange rates. And finally, S mean savings and investments. So let me just give you the framework first, how I look at the guides framework and exactly what I'm looking at when I'm analyzing a potential target that, okay, in which sectors now am I expected to go and acquire the organization? Am I going to merge it? Am I going to acquire it fully? Am I going to acquire the controlling stake, non-controlling stake? So I need to first choose an industry. Where should I go? I need to also choose the country. So in terms of the GDP, preferably, I strongly recommend look at the real GDP growth rate, which says about the level and the growth rates of the economy. And the GDP components are typically C, I. C means consumption, I means investment, G means government spending, and then X and M, that is export and import. And then we also look at the drivers of real GDP growth rate, which is basically capital, labor, and the 5 M's. And we preferably look at the PPP adjusted GDP per capita. So if you look at the GDP per capita of the PPP adjusted GDP per capita of people in US, China, India, etc., then you will realize that people in India are better off. So it is also said that sometimes if you are earning, let's say, 100,000 and above in USA, it is as equivalent as maybe rupees 20 lakhs in India in terms of the purchasing power parity. That is what you can have if you have, let's say, 1 lakh USD or 100,000 USD in USA, which is usually the best price, best salary for a CPAs. And trust me, CPAs usually go on earning, I think, somewhere between 100,000 to 300,000 USD per annum. But if you're earning that kind of amount sitting in the USA, I think it could be as equivalent as earning somewhere around 25 lakhs to 75 lakhs in India. So looking at that purchasing parity power adjusted GDP is very important, and how that PPP adjusted GDP has grown truly reflects the growth of that country and the people living there, their spending capacity, which basically brings conclusion towards the potential demand and potential spending pattern, consumer behavior in that industry. Secondly, we also look at the unemployment and the utilization, where it's quite quite often we look at the unemployment rate, poverty rate, what kind of the measures of income inequality are available to us, and then how can we interpret that data, draw inferences, and try to build up the case. And last but not the least, the capacity utilization. So don't tell me that there is a huge land that is available in the country. Why have we not yet utilized it? Don't tell me that, okay, you have so much of assets, but if you are not really utilizing it, then it doesn't make any sense. So how efficiently you deploy your capital, how efficiently you deploy your capacity is also important. And then the next part is, so GUI, I is on inflation and interest rates. So on the inflation terms, it becomes important for us to look at the CPI, that is Consumer Price Index, and the GDP deflator. By the way, WPI was something that we used to look at, but now India is also now adopted to CPI. So we have been now constantly looking at the CPIs and then estimating the revenue growth that we are looking at, how much is attributable to the inflation indicator, because then that's not the real growth. Even though, let's say, we are looking at the the nominal revenue growth of, let's say, 10%, and if we want to create performance obligations for the owner, or let's say if I am acquiring 100% in another organization, and if the promoter is saying he is going to bring year on year, let's say, minimum 20% growth rate in terms of revenue, then out of 20%, maybe 5% could be attributable directly to the inflation, because he's going to just increase the price. The true growth lies when he brings new products, he increases the volume, and then how innovatively he captures the larger market share. That doesn't get captured with the total number of 20%. So while we create a performance obligations, while we invest and get a controlling stake of the companies, we preferably try to see how the CPI is impacting the products or the companies in which we are investing. Then the interest rates. So the interest rates, it is strongly recommended that you very closely analyze short-term interest rates and long-term interest rates. The real interest rates can be observed through government bonds and the corporate bonds. Let's move ahead. Then the GUID. D means debts and deficits. So government debt held by the public as a share of GDP is very, very, very important. See what happened to Sri Lanka. What is expected to happen to Pakistan? What is expected to happen to some of the countries around, including France. So how stable that economy is becomes very important. Now you might be questioning, how is it really directly connected when I do the numerical calculation of valuation, and tell you how it is. When we do the discount rate calculation by using the CAPM model, what we do is we say risk-free rate plus beta into the equity risk premium, which is RM minus RF. But you tell me, if you are investing in a company, let's assume the same company is located in India, same company located in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in China, in USA, in Japan, Germany, would you be investing the same amount for a same level of share without or overlooking the country risk? Obviously not, right? Even though, let's say, the investment in USD, so we are not looking at the impact because of the currency. But at a country level, there's a country risk that is present. So while we calculate the WACC, or while we calculate the KE, that is cost of equity, typically the CAPM formula needs to be adjusted for the alpha that then captures the country risk premium. So then the country risk premium has one of the qualitative analysis at the back end, which basically lies in looking at the government debt held by the public, government held by the foreign countries, the government, the funding, or like often these World Trade Organizations comes out and they bail out the countries. By the way, India received the last bailout, I think during early 90s or late 80s. After that, we have not asked for bailout, and we have been in that sense self-sufficient. So that obviously offers the more stability at a country level, which means the low country risk premium. So while we are negotiating on the selling side for Indian entrepreneurs with the foreign institutional investors, or with foreign VC investors, or for foreign investors, then these are the points become very important, because then we need to prove them why they should apply the lower discount rate to value our organization if they are doing the capital rationing, and they have to make a choice between whether to invest in Indian organization or to Nepali organization, or or to whether to invest in Indian organization or to Sri Lankan, or let's say to Vietnamese organization. So in that sense, across the Asian specs, geographically, when the investors comes in from Europe or the western part, or maybe on the Japanese side, and if they are making a policy choice whether to invest in China or in India, then we usually say that we usually utilize this deficit information, data information, to then in turn bring the monetary impact on the lower discount rate, and that's how we augment the valuation for the negotiation. Now, GUID has been discussed. Next is E, which is external balances and exchange rates. So the current account balance becomes very, very important. And like I said, we periodically, not every day, not every month, but once in a quarter, look at the quarterly data that is displayed and shared by various countries. And again, not for all countries, but for typical countries such as US, China, some of the countries in Europe and Japan. Primary UK, Germany, and some other countries. But while we look at it, we also try to look at the current account deficit, and then we try to connect the current account deficit to the exchange rate. Now, if you look at, let's say, some of the software companies who are year on year clocking the revenue growth of, let's say, 20%. Now, the revenue growth is clocked at 20% because you read their INR financial statements, and they tend to say that INR is their functional currency because that's where majority of their cost. That's the currency in which they incur majority of their cost. But then if you try to further analyze the revenue, some part of the revenue growth is attributable to inflation. Some part is definitely attributable to the volume, but majority of the growth, according to me, is attributable to the exchange rate. And that has happened in the last couple of years, because the exchange rate was almost 62 rupees per dollar, and it has moved to 82 rupees per dollar. That is 20 rupees. 20 divided by 60, if you do, it's 33% depreciation of rupee in such a small time. So I'm not going into the debate whether it is good or bad. Okay, it's definitely good for the export market. But let's bring back our attention to the valuation that we are doing. Is it sustainable growth? And if the growth attributable to exchange is not sustainable, will it be offsetted with the volume growth? And if not, then then I need to devalue all those potential investments. Or are they going to then diversify their market, and then now they have been serving, let's say, in the US region, are they now diversifying to Australia region, Europe region? How AI, ML, and chat GPT is now influencing their existing decision making. Maybe on the revenue side, it may not get influenced, but if they are now with the additional automation is going to help them to reduce their cost, I'm still okay with that. But that kind of attention is necessary at a company specific information, which can be drawn looking at the macroeconomic factors such as current account deficit and the balances of the GDP. And then we also look at some of the portfolio and direct investment, then accumulated assets, and maybe the inaccurate liabilities that were present on the balance sheets of the countries. Now, some of you may get what I'm saying, some of you may not get exactly what I'm saying, but that's fine. As you sharpen your skills into valuation profession and you start reading the macroeconomic indicators over the period, you will also hone yourself to interpret and understand this data. And last but not the least, the savings and investments, which becomes fundamental meat for any country for reinvestment and growth. So national, public, and private savings as a share of GDP and the investment as a share of GDP is very, very important. That gives our insights, and that gives our at least an indication that, okay, fine, that's where the country is leading. Okay. So I think what we can do is, on the technical front, I believe that I have given deeper insights into how the way the valuation approached when we try to do it in M&A. It's almost 11:20. I'll take a pause here, and maybe Astha, you can take over from here. And if there are any set of questions, maybe including technical questions, we'll be more than happy to address. I thought to have, instead of having the detailed 2-hour discussion, I prefer to have only a squeeze discussion for with the quality inputs, and I prefer to end early if at all there are no further questions.
Yeah, sir. Thank you, sir, for that insightful session on the roles of valuation in merger and acquisition. So, as a moderator, I'm asking question on behalf of the participants.
Sure.
So, our first question is, how does good governance and good management team translate into numbers that can be incorporated in valuation?
Yeah, the probability of failure is reduced when you have good governance. So usually we have databases of, for example, the companies that were incorporated, let's say 1990s, and out of how many those companies are lasting today in year, let's say 2023. Now, if you look at that particular ratio, you would realize that some failures are obviously attributable to less better ideas. Some failures are attributable to maybe competition. But trust me, whatever failure that you want to attribute to any other kind of reasons, primarily it is a management that takes or owns the responsibility of that failure. So what typically we do is we try to identify the probability of success and probability of failure, which means the probability of survival in case of organizations. And if we believe that, okay, the management is better than many others, then we try to adjust the probability of survival on the high side. And or on the other hand side, if the governance is less, we try to apply it on the we apply it in such a manner that we say, okay, the 10% risk is added because of the less governance that we see in this organization. Now, how that governance can be identified, you can definitely look at it from the disclosure side. See what all good disclosures are made, even by the unlisted organization, definitely offers better insights into the information of that company. And the more you speak with the director, and there is a separate due diligence that is expected to be made, and you are expected to speak to each of the independent directors, if they have any independent directors, or the directors, while you evaluate these companies. Often startups invite some of the senior mentors and mentees to take positions such as advisory board, not the direct board of directors, but the advisory board. So you need to also speak to them, and then ultimately you need to pass a judgment. And trust me, you can do so when you start speaking to multiple people and start analyzing them. So it's a combination of primary and secondary research that can be applied, but ultimately to convert it into a number is a matter of justification, and will also be subject to your negotiation when it comes to the deal table. So when, as a buyer, I am expected to negotiate saying that you can bring more governance and more, and in that sense, more efficiency to enhance the value. As a seller, your job is to prove me that the governance is there, the better disclosure norms are there, the transparency is there, you have been taking decisions which are not lopsided, but by looking at the ESG and likewise. So there are different frameworks that can be applied, but actually there is no numerical model to convert it. Can you create it intuitively? Answer is yes. For example, we do the camel rating in case of banks, or we do the credit rating in case of corporates. You can actually do the ESG rating by giving the marks, and then on that basis, that framework can be applied, saying that, okay, because of these marks, out of 100, your score is, let's say, 70%, and for the 70% score, your discount rate will be reduced by, let's say, 0.5%. If your score is, let's say, less than 50%, your discount will be increased by 2%, or let's say 1%. So that kind of framework can be built and then looked at.
Thank you for your response. Our next question is, based on your explanation, do we have the valuation multiple for different industries?
Can you repeat last sentence for the on the basis
valuation
of
multiples for the different industries?
No, that's a database that you are asking. Now we are not going to speak about the exact multiple. And by the way, these multiples keep on changing. Okay. So my recommendation is, you need to do your research. You need to look at the databases. You need to choose the comparable companies and then look at that multiple. Okay. It's a very specific question that I very respectfully deny to answer. Let's go to the next question.
How much weight is being given to technology obsolescence in the business environment?
A lot of weightage. A lot of weightage is given to the technology obsolescence. Rather, we typically do that when companies represent only an IP. So often startup companies come up with IP and no revenue companies. Now, if these are no revenue or less revenue companies, and if they're asking for valuation of anything beyond 10 crore, I think what they're asking is not the value of the business, but actually the value of the IP. Because the only asset that I see as of today, including an off-balance sheet item, is IP. They don't have customers, to value. They have how many customers? 3 customers, 4 customers, that's it. So in that sense, the value of IP is equal to value of the business in true sense, in commercial sense. And if you, my strong recommendation is, you can please read the valuation of intangibles, the standard on valuation of intangibles issued by the Valuation Standard Board of ICAI. And in that particular standard, you will be able to read and understand the importance of technology obsolescence and why it becomes significant to look and calculate and apply and calibrate while you do the valuation of intangible. So technological obsolescence, it's very important, provided you understand the technology. I have my, so again, because of the experience that we carry, we also run separate technology organization, because of which I was and by the way, I have been working mostly with the technology companies, so hence I can speak that language. So if someone comes to me and says that, okay, I'm working in a particular framework, we know for a fact in which framework you are working and is it outdated or not. For example, today I request all of you and look at the Angular framework. Now there are so many other companies who are on the historical Angular framework, for which the Google have stopped offering is any support. Now if your application is on historical front end Angular, irrespective of the fact that your core machine, whether developed in Python or whether developed in .NET or any kind of other language with kind of functionalities that you have, if the feel good factor is not there, if the UI UX is not there, then though the technology is there at the back end, at the front end, you're obsolete. And ultimately it's the consumer who is going to pay you for the product that he uses. So in that sense, I say that yes, technology obsolescence becomes heavily important. Today what is relevant, tomorrow may not be relevant. And because of the advent of the AI and ML, the obsolescence has been accelerated. So as the growth is accelerated, the mirror image of the growth is the obsolescence. So if you are assuming that your growth rate while you are valuing, let's say, tech-based companies 20%, you need to also look at your free cash flows. And in the free cash flow calculation, you need to ask yourself whether the relevant adjustment is made for the continued cash investment towards research and development. So if the research and development cash outflow is not shown, then your obsolescence value will go up. If the research and development cost is shown, which is parallel to comparable companies, you look at any US based company or Indian based company and identify out of the total revenue component how much is the research and development cost. It would be 20%, it could be 25%. And if your company is incurring a cost of, let's say, 5%, then your annuity rate should be less. So in that sense, the technology obsolescence can be plugged in. Sure. Next question.
So our next question is, price to sales may be better metric in valuation as
So yeah, I mean, price to valuation, I mean, price to any metrics, price to sales, price to anything is a good metrics. But like I said, when you say price, I believe you're looking at the market capitalization. So I usually prefer to utilize the enterprise value multiples than the equity value multiples for obvious reasons. The impact of leverage is not captured when you look at the equity value multiples. So my recommendation is, while you are identifying the multiples from the listed companies, it is recommended to rely on the enterprise value multiple. Apply the enterprise value multiple that includes the impact of leveraging, etc. Apply it to your factor. So if your subject company's revenue is X, then the observed, identified, selected enterprise value multiple will be applied here to your multiple to get the enterprise value of your organization. And the enterprise value of your organization is to be reduced with your debt, your hybrid instrument, to finally get what we call as your equity valuation. So though the P multiples or any price multiple is a good multiple, they are not considered to be better or best multiples because they don't capture the impact of leverage. And hence I recommend all of you to use the enterprise value multiple instead of the equity value multiple.
Okay. Our next question is, while valuing the IT outsourcing companies, which has a long-standing business but currently making losses, what kind of multiples would you recommend for valuation?
Maybe the revenue multiple, and that too, if there's a loss-making organization, you need to again go a little deeper and investigate why their losses are. They could be cyclical losses, and if the company has good reserves and the company is into services, then I believe that the company will roll back. Primarily, the losses are attributable to the high salary cost and you are unable to get the contracts. Then you have to further investigate why company was unable to contract. Where they are missing in the competitive landscape. Is it the force from their customer? Is it the force from their suppliers? Like, for example, you in the IT company, the talent is important because they're human driven organizations. So if you're not paying good salary, maybe the great talent is not attracted to you. And if the great talent is not attracted to you, it directly impacts the overall conclusion of the project. And if projects are not going well, sometimes client through the contract, they apply LDs, that is liquidation damages, or they apply certain damages, and they don't accept to pay you. Now, I think the further investigation is necessary to understand why the losses were made and what rectifying actions management proposes to take in order to sustain the businesses. So on that basis, like I said, you definitely cannot apply the EBIT or the profitability multiples because they are negative, but you can then continue to apply the revenue multiple on the financial metric side. And there are many other non-financial matrices which are available, which includes, for example, the website visits, which includes many other non-financial metrics that can tend to prove maybe the customer footfall and customer view fall on your product and your brand image. Last but not the least, some of the losses could also be attributable to the research that you are putting towards the product that you are building. So just to draw an analogy, you can look at the financial statements of Facebook when they declare that they want to build something like a metaverse. On a quarter-on-quarter basis, their substantial investment was going into the research cost. And by the way, research cannot be capitalized. Development cost can be capitalized. So another reason for losses could be because the service company is now trying to move from service to a product company, and that's where they want to they are researching to build some product, and then whether that research is giving certain result or not result, that kind of assessment is required. So once you do all these analysis and you look at the competitive landscape, I believe that you'll be in a better position to select which metric to apply. Is it the revenue multiple that matters, and whether to apply it on the last 12 months revenue or next 12 months revenue also matters.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, how multiples differ from developed markets to developing markets? Example, generally Indian markets multiples are always higher than US markets, especially price earning ratio.
I think, let's not draw this generic conclusion saying that generally something is like that. As a valuation professional, I strongly recommend, please use data and let your decisions be data driven. Something that looks at a point in time could be a structural difference. For example, in the US, when the recessionary trends were present, or let's say in 2007 the subprime crisis happened, and then in 2012 when the euro crisis happened, and then in 2020 and 21 when the pandemic happened, the markets behave differently at a different point in time. I remember that it was initially the US market that collapsed, and then the Indian market had collapsed, then the US market was recovered, then the Singapore market was recovered, and the Indian market was recovered. So if you are looking at, for you it could be the same point in time when you are comparing these markets, but the money flows are different. Okay, India, it's very India as a geography is very strategic in many sense, and it's far stable economy than many other countries in the South Asia and in the Asian continent. So my recommendation is, see, again, India is again a non-monarchy and democrat. It's a country with the democracy. You look at, let's say, the Aramco, which comes from the Saudi. Now, the Saudi is a monarchy. So the country risk represented in the Saudi is different. The Aramco's valuation, because it's in Saudi, is different. And the valuation of similar oil companies in USA is different because, there's a country risk that gets plugged in. So I understand on the one side, you are saying there is a generic conclusion that can be drawn, but you never know that that conclusion may not be attributable to the operational efficiency or the inherent strength of the company, but could be attributable to the country factors. So you need to either neutralize it to look at the all world as a single village concept, or you rather continue to calibrate it to identify value of an organization in particular geography.
Our next question is, how reliable is a revenue multiple in current market, considering entities like Swiggy, fintech company, as a lot of entities are still loss making?
See, like I said, if you continue to view these companies on the basis of the profitability, then I think we are mistaken. We need to understand the business model, and like I said, we need to also understand the cyclicity of creating an organization. The days are gone when you typically with small capital create a company and then you maintain it profitably. In order to make an impact in today's world, you need to deploy very innovative strategies, including heavy expenditure on research, continuous experimentation, innovation, and last but not the least, heavy expenditure on the marketing. What happened in case of the Baijus? They sponsored Indian cricket team. Now the sponsorship of Indian cricket team may not directly attribute to the sales growth rate. It attributes to the sales growth rate only because it is classified as a marketing expenditure, but the accounting standards don't allow you to classify such expenditure to capitalize it today, because revenue will come tomorrow. As of today, I believe that in that sense, the accounting standards may not be as robust as they should be to capture this. Because if we try to make it as robust, then what happens? Then, everyone try to misuse these standards and start capitalizing everything, saying that the tomorrow revenue will come. So I think in that sense, accounting standards are great. But when you try to look at the accounting that has been done on the basis of the accounting standards and apply the similar science to look at the valuation and then analyze and then possibly pass a judgment about that company, whether it is right or wrong, I think that's not fair. The business models are fundamentally different. The expenditure that they do is with an intention of the customer acquisition. So I'm still okay if the losses are funded, provided that there is a related customer growth rate and they're out competing their markets. So it's all about getting the market share. It's all about creating the new market. Like, for example, the IPL, the cricket was still there. IPL is a new concept, came in, it's still a cricket. But today, IPL was previously not there. We all had 24 hours of our life. We all were, busy with our work portfolio, etc. But today we still find time to watch IPL matches. It's the additional market that was created. So there are certain companies where the Swiggy, Zomato, Baijus, and I know for a fact that many professionals and many investors looking at the short-term profitability, but I think that's definitely not their business models. Now ultimately, whether these companies will fail or whether these companies will succeed is an answer in the long term. So my recommendation is that don't look at today's profitability, which is a loss, and then say that the market valuation is not correct. Now I am not denying the fact that these companies could be overvalued, but because these companies are loss making, definitely doesn't mean that these companies should be negatively valued. The value will definitely be positive because they have the existing customer, they have the ecosystem that has been placed, and it definitely offers a facilitation. Today, the additional market was created. We never ordered something 20 years back through mobile, but today we are able to do that, which is the additional market that has been created. And yes, there is some value. The only question is, are they overvalued or undervalued is the question for which valuation standards are there, for which you and I valuation professionals are there, and for which definitely we need to pass a judgment and within the four corners of the framework. So to conclude, you may not look at the financial matrices to value loss making company. You can still look at some other non-financial matrices to value those companies. But while you work with those matrices, your skepticism, your objectivity as a professional is important while you conclude something to be a fair value.
So our next question is how to adjust market value of debt when calculating enterprise value.
So no, see, the formula for enterprise value is the market value of equity plus market value of debt is equal to the enterprise value. The enterprise value of listed organizations can be calculated on the basis of the market capitalization of those entities, which is equal to the number of shares outstanding into price per share as of that date. And then you look at all debt that is available there. If you have access to the repayment schedule, etc., you utilize that and you apply the interest rate that is today applicable to that company, because you get the credit rating of that company. Or then you need to perform the synthetic credit rating yourself and come out with that credit rating and then apply the interest rate applicable in that context. That's how you calculate the market value of the debt of these comparable entities. So market capitalization plus market value of debt is equal to enterprise value of the public companies. Or maybe because you don't have data of the cash repayments or the repayments of the loans of these public companies, for those companies, you can still assume the book value of debt to be the market value of debt, which is perfectly fine. But while you calculate the enterprise value of the comparable company, and on that basis, you calculate the comparable multiple. Now, when you apply that multiple to your revenue, and then calculate the enterprise value of your company, you know your debt, you know your repayment schedule, and you know what interest rate that should be applied if you borrow today. So you please discount your debt value by looking at the your credit rating and your interest rate, and then that market value of debt, when you reduce from this computed enterprise value, what you get is the equity value of your company.
Next question is, what are the good resources to keep on oneself updated about recent changes and factors to be considered in valuation?
Can you repeat the question? What databases was that?
Good resources. What are the good resources?
The best resources, government websites, the finance ministry. I mean, these are some of the free resources, by the way. All government websites. You can please look at the Fed website, RBI website, government websites. And like I said, there are many other databases that can be explored. I'll tell you the databases that I use. We use Bloomberg and we use Standard & Poor's Capital IQ database. They are costly. Yes, they are genuinely costly affairs. But I think, those who work in this industry, they have no choice than to get access to quality information. Because see, for a professional, it could be cost of approximately, let's say, 50 lakhs rupees per annum on a subscription basis, 20 lakhs rupees to 30 lakhs rupees. It could be minimum subscription cost is approximately, let's say, 25 lakhs to 30 lakhs rupees per annum. And you can check it online. You will get to see, all the subscription details. But the advisory that you're offering is for the transaction worth millions and billions of dollars. So just imagine a transaction of, let's say, 500 crore or let's say 700 crore is done on the basis of free data available on the Google that has been written by we don't know whom, and we don't know the authenticity of those data points. The alternative could be you actually go and look at the financial statements of the companies and try to get those data points, and then you collect all those companies together to call an industry, and then you collect all those industries together to say, okay, this is a growth rate at a country level. But it becomes too complex. So my recommendation is that it's easier to rather subscribe to certain databases. There are some other databases which are also available by economists like EIU, and maybe you need to explore that. But at Mind, like I said, most of the valuation professionals internationally, what we use is we use Bloomberg and we use Capital IQ by S&P.
Next question is, how to value a food processing company? How to determine the multiplier?
Yeah, food processing company. See, again, if you are looking at again the multiple based approach, you look at various food processing organizations in India, outside India. You look at their revenue, you look at their market capitalization, you get the multiple, you apply to your organization. You can also look at the comparable transactions that have happened. So you need to look at the M&A deals. You can, like, PitchBook is another database that we use, where we get a lot of deals that have happened in a particular sector. You look at those deals and then you ask yourself how the other company is doing as compared to your company. Then once you put yourself into that competitive landscape, either you are doing as equivalent as the other company, or you are doing better or less better than the other company. Then with those matrices and with the range of the values, then exactly what should be your probable deal value.
Okay. The next question is whether liquidity discount is to be applied in case of unlisted entities.
Yes, it must be applied in case of unlisted entities. Many valuers are not doing it. Please do that. If you are a registered valuer and if you are not doing it, trust me, tomorrow if the notice comes, then don't come back to us saying that now please save us from this disaster. You will be questioned. You need to apply the discount for lack of control, and you need to apply discount for lack of marketability, DLOM and DLOC. And we have been discussing and teaching all these things, how it's to be done, etc. in ICI RVO session. By the way, today is the seminar of VSB, not ICI RVO. So I'll stick to this distinction here. But yes, there is a lot of material which is published by ICI on all these terms. You must apply it to unlisted entities.
So our next question is, while reducing the value of hybrid instruments from enterprise value to compute the value of equity, whether we need to deduct the whole value or proportionate value of hybrid instrument
Sure.
attributable to
Yeah, good question. I
attributable
strongly
to debt portion.
Yeah, correct. I first of all, I'll recommend you to refer to, the learning side, Index 32 and Index 109. Index 32 will help you understand what is the meaning of, the financial instruments and what is an equity, what is financial liability, and um, what is, financial asset. In that sense, if it's a combination of equity and financial liability, we call it as a hybrid instrument. The question is relevant because that's where Index 109 requires you to do the valuation of the hybrid instrument at the recognition, that is at the initial inception. So if it's a new instrument, you know the value because the organization, I'm speaking about the larger organizations who adopt Index, okay, must have already componentized, and the debt component must have been separately accounted for, that can be reduced. But if it's unlisted space and if you have the hybrid instrument, then definitely the debt component should be separate out. So the enterprise value minus the debt portion of the hybrid instrument gives the residual equity value of the equity outstanding as well as of the equity portion of the hybrid instrument.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing your expertise with us today. We appreciate your time and insights. Your insights and expertise in valuation and merger and acquisition have been invaluable, and we are grateful for the knowledge you have shared with us today. Thank you, sir, once again for making this Valuation Manthan series webinar a success. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day.
So, before, I end this discussion, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you, for attending this conference on valuation in mergers and acquisition. And I would like to also extend my gratitude to Valuation Standard Board Chairman, Mr. Chug, and Vice Chairman, Madam Priti Savla, and also moderator, Asta Gulati. You did a great job. Thank you, Asta, for identifying relevant questions for me and helping me, throughout this session. And I hope that you found information and insight shared in this session valuable and informative. Thank you once again for your time and attention. And I wish you all very best, in coming days. Let's make this institute great again. Let's make, this country proud again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.